I think
address
the
the
left hate
problem.
men. I mean,
Just to pause you.
They do. Even movies like Barbie. I'm slightly left. I think masculinity has never changed. All that's changed is the interpretation of it.
In one breathtakingly confident sentence,
This is Rationality Rules. I don't know if you guys watch him, but I watch him on occasion.
Piers Morgan just defeated his own argument. He is trying to claim that masculinity is a fixed, eternal truth, while simultaneously admitting that our understanding of it changes completely depending on where we live. It is a moment of total philosophical incoherence. He's essentially saying the thing hasn't changed, only everything about how we practice the thing has changed.
The interpretation of it.
And this accidental self-own is just the crack in the dam.
Rationality Rules is kind of like Alex O'Connor in the Debate Bro bubble, but not Debate Bro. They're more atheist adjacent. So he's a little bit more serious about watching debates. He's a little bit more, he's not like the Destiny people like Kyla is. Like, I hardly doubt, in my opinion, that he would show up on a Jubilee video, but he still is in that sphere where like there's some level of seriousness. Now, I think Alex O'Connor did show up on a Jubilee video, which again, engaging with Jubilee is like, you know, like in the format that they're doing it, like the one person versus 20. Anybody who shows up in there is a red flag to me personally, but
What we're about to see is a man realizing that he cannot answer the question in front of him, leading to moments of deflection so clumsy they become accidental comedy.
What's that got to do with them being masculine?
Why hello, my fellow apes, I hope you are well. Today, we're breaking down Piers Morgan's appearance on Jubilee Surrounded, where he faced off against someone named Kyla. And
of course, you know, Kyla and I had a falling out years ago because she sided with Destiny and I moved away from the bubble and I told her, you got to do what you got to do, girl, with peace and love, good luck. But she's like, you know, his friend and she wants to save him, even though he was recording people without consent and sharing that content with people. And he was facing a felony in Florida and all the other horrible things he's done. But here she is. So in one way, her career is looking great. This is a great thing for Kyla. In another way, it's just an indicator that she's still in the bubble. So it's kind of like, it's like weird. It's like you're happy for her. Her career's taking off. You're also sad for her because she's still in this bubble, you know?
the reason we're watching this isn't just because Piers gets frustrated, it's because Kyla traps him with a single, devastating historical question regarding Spartans and Athenians. You're going to see Piers realize that if he answers her question honestly, his entire premise collapses. So instead, he uses every trick in the book to ensure that the conversation happens on his terms, not hers. Put simply, frame control. So we're going to track that one unanswered question throughout this exchange. We'll count the dodges, we'll analyze the escape tactics, and ultimately we'll see how Jubilee's own editors had to step in to expose him. It starts—
Wow, it's so weird how time goes by. I haven't seen Piers Morgan in a bit. He looks so significantly like older, but that's just the reality of like life is changing. We are becoming the new adults. Like, you know, Piers has been around for so long and always been Piers Morgan, but he is getting older. All these people are going to age out and then we're going to take over. And I think that's why young people are trying to make a name for themselves, especially and so aggressively through Piers Morgan. And I just think, you know, that's how it works, isn't it?
right here with the claim that builds the trap he's about to walk into.
My first
Wait. Chet says Rationality Rules kind of got on my shit list after commenting on trans people in sports. Like I said, I don't watch him religiously. It's only on occasion. I don't know anything about that. Oh no, is he one of those like keep trans people out of sports thing? Oh, gross.
surrounded claim is that masculinity has never been toxic.
So there's the claim on the table. Piers Morgan, a man who's made a career out of being the loudest person in the room, steps into the circle to defend a claim that is absolute, provocative, and, as we're about to see, intellectually impossible to defend. Unless you cheat, of course. Masculinity has never been toxic, he says. Not rarely, not often misunderstood, but never. It is a universal negative claim. And
Chet says Piers Morgan is a conservative. No, he definitely is a conservative, but he's always been the liberal. That's the problem. A lot of guys who are liberal are now conservative. Like Dawkins was liberal, Hitchens was liberal, but they're really just conservatives. And that's why you have to keep deconstructing it. But like Piers was always for entertainment first and foremost, you know?
anyone who's ever taken a Philosophy 101 class knows that universal negatives are incredibly difficult to maintain because all it takes is a single contrary example to shatter the entire structure. Now, before we get to the mechanics of how he defends this, or rather—
Wait, there was a big breakup and scandal with the Texas atheist community, the community of Matt Dillahunty. I know Matt Dillahunty's work, of course. Was it over the trans stuff or was it over something else? Matt Dillahunty is also somebody that I on occasion kind of check in with, but really stay away from. I'm not really, the atheist bubble, the boy bubble, atheist bubble is kind of like snooze fest to me a little bit, but yet I do find myself just checking in like, how's it going, boys? how we doing over here? And then I kind of check out again.
How he avoids defending it, we need to appreciate the setting. This is Jubilee surrounded. It is a
You said yes on the trans stuff. Was Matt Dillahunty pro-trans? Because I thought Matt was pro-trans.
gladiator pit. The format itself favors the aggressor. It favors the person who can dominate the conversation and hold control, simply because one side will always get voted out. This is where nuance goes to die. But every once in a while, someone genuinely brilliant steps into the ring. Enter Kyler.
One second. How do you do? I'm Piers.
So I guess where I want to kind of start is talking about masculinity. So I view this, do you think that this is like socially emergent, I imagine, to some degree?
Right out of the gate, Kyler is trying to establish a shared reality. If Piers admits that masculinity is socially emergent, meaning that it's constructed by society, shaped by culture, and changes over time, then his claim that it has never been toxic becomes impossible to defend. If society builds masculinity, and societies have built terrible things, slavery, fascism, segregation, then it stands to reason that a society could build a toxic version of masculinity. But if he grants this premise, the game is over before it begins. So, how does he answer the question?
Pause. Chad says, I think so, yes, but he disinvited rationality rules. I think it sparked a whole victimization. What the hell? You know what? It's the era, as we move into 2026, of really knowing what bubble you want to be with and who you want to associate with. And it's so difficult because these debates happen because we're on opposite ends. But if we are debating a Piers Morgan, we're also uplifting and platforming him, which is why I don't like the debate bubble, because it forces you to also platform. Like, that's why I'm annoyed with Hassan, which I'm always annoyed with Hassan, to be fair, when he was like, oh my God, Charlie Kirk died, and I was going to debate him in 2 weeks. Why were you going to debate Charlie Kirk and platform him? It doesn't help you. It's okay to react to his stuff and disagree with his points, but collabing with Charlie Kirk and putting your name next to his, like, in that way, does not help anyone but you reach more clout, which I know Hassan wants because he wants more conservative men to see him so they can become liberal. But like with peace and love, I feel like people do not know conservatives. No conservative man in my life will ever be convinced by Hassan Piker. Never. There's not one. I can't even imagine a conservative man in my life being convinced by Hassan Piker with peace and love. Okay, no offense. So like you're not going for conservatives, you're going for like liberals, maybe like men who have already like left religion. You're not going for like MAGA people. And Charlie Kirk appeals mostly to MAGA people, ultimately. So it's like, I don't know, bro. You do you though.
Does he engage with the concept of social emergence?
Do you think that this is like socially emergent, I imagine, to some degree?
Well, I think the truth about the whole toxic debate about masculinity is it's a completely new phenomenon. Before, about 30 years ago, nobody ever used that phrase. It's only really in the last 10 years it's suddenly been amplified and used for absolutely everything.
Notice how he doesn't even glance at the question. He treats it like something foul, catches a whiff and bins it immediately. Instead, he pivots to a meta-commentary about the phrase toxic masculinity. This is the first trick of frame control. Ignore the concept, attack the terminology.
It's a completely new phenomenon.
And in doing so, Piers commits a category error. He's confusing the linguistic category with real-world existence, suggesting that because...
Pause. Chat says it seems like people only change from personal experience. If by personal experience we mean an embodied personal experience that forces you to have a philosophical deconstruction, yes. Because a lot of people said to me over the years, I can't believe your parents are still homophobic when they have 3 gay kids. And it's because like, it's not personal enough, but it's also not embodied enough. Or the fact that so many people in my family are definitely bisexual, but they are not bisexual anymore because they found Jesus. And it's like, yeah, your personal experience isn't enough, right? Because you would think like, oh, Blair White is trans, she's having a personal experience, but it's not the right one. You have to have an embodied philosophical experience that radically changes and bubble pops you into a different way of viewing reality, so you can have a different relationship with life. And that is really, really hard. Like, that is so hard to do, right?
The label is new, the phenomenon must also be new. Honestly, it's like arguing that gravity didn't exist before Newton named it. But Piers is just warming up, because he now launches into his...
Pause, that's very important. It's like saying gravity didn't exist until Newton named it. Exactly. That's why I say men do not invent shit. That's why I'm saying stop saying you invented it. You discovered it, you came upon it, but everything exists. It's not you. It's a combination of things. It's like we want to take credit for things that like, it's not about us. It's not about our ego. And that's why like discovering things, racing to the moon, all of these things we're doing for ego should have been done for the sake of curiosity and knowledge. But it's always a dick contest, isn't it? Not to be crude, but you know what I mean?
Favorite tactic. the Gish Gallop. Named after the creationist Dwayne Gish, this involves drowning your opponent in a torrent of weak arguments and half-truths.
Pause. Since this is related, Chet said, Brit, will you make a video on Sneeko? What are your thoughts on him recently? Have not checked in with him. I have no idea what he's doing. I did check in on Kyla's channel this morning to see what she's up to, and she apparently had a conversation with him a month ago. I did not watch it. Look, it's over. They're done. Any chance that these people reform or become better is like so low. The probability is so low. And so like, do I think it's possible for them to change? Yes. But it is so significantly low that it's just not interesting to me. And so though I check in with a lot of people, I have not checked in with that community because I'm just like, it's not going to happen. You know, I think these people there's no incentive, you know, for them to change. So I just don't keep up with them, to be honest. The most updates I get are when my algorithm randomly shares it or when my Discord shares stuff. But yeah, I'm not going to hold my breath for these people, you know?
Overwhelming their cognitive load. It exploits Brandolini's law. The energy required to refute bullshit is an order of magnitude greater than the energy required to produce.
Not to mention that the fact that I'm even talking about Kyla now means I might get harassed for the next 2 weeks. If I made a video about Sneeko, I'm just going to get harassed. If I make a video about Destiny, I'm just going to get harassed. Because that's the only way these people function in this space. That's why I'm saying, like, I'm willing to watch this through another YouTuber. And I think it's interesting that Kyla's career went this direction, but I'm not surprised. But like, these communities are just not safe to even talk about casually, right? Like, they literally weaponize their audiences against you. So fingers crossed, hopefully this doesn't bring me too much harassment, but I'm mentally prepared for it.
Producer. Throw enough mud at the wall and your opponent spends all their time cleaning up instead of making their own point.
It's only really in the last 10 years it's suddenly been amplified and used for absolutely everything. But I thought it might be useful to just start with something that Chris Williamson, you may know him, great guy, and he came on my show recently. And he said that all the following things have been blamed on toxic masculinity.
Okay, before we let him roll, just look at his source. He cites Chris Williamson, a podcaster and former reality TV star, as his primary reference. No offense to Chris, but this is a comically obvious appeal to false authority. In a debate about sociology and history, citing Chris Williamson is the intellectual equivalent of citing Joe Rogan to disprove evolution.
What?
If evolution is real, and if there is this constant, I don't know.
It is absurd on its face.
Why would you reference Chris Williamson? That's so random. The YouTuber? Am I stupid? Wait.
Is real, and
is the intellectual false authority as his primary reference.
Yeah.
No offense to
What? Why would you reference Chris?
But citing Chris Williamson is the intellectual equivalent of citing Joe Rogan to disprove evolution.
if evolution is real, and if there is this constant, I don't know.
Wait. I have a theory about this. Boys reference each other to give each other more validity. That's what it is. Oh, my friend is valid. My friend is valid. Guys, that's what was happening here with me. This is why I think it's interesting. This is why group dynamics are dangerous. Okay, with no judgment, when you reference each other, you build credibility from one another. And that's why I erased myself from these communities, because I realized like there was no way for me to collab with them without it sounding like I was giving them some sense of like validity. Like, you must remember, right? You remember when Papa Gut and Abba and all these people were lecturing me for being nice to Sneeko? And then I was like, oh, do you not want me to be nice to misogynistic men? Like bad men? They're like, no. And I was like, okay, bye-bye to all of you. Papa Gut is a Zionist. Abba kept batting for Destiny even after I DM'd him. Destiny was being a predator. Like, he already like harassed me publicly and did what he did to me, right? So like, the irony is all these men who are lecturing me about being nicer to a boy 10 years younger than all of them, 10 years younger than all of them, thought they were safe. And that was the problem. All of these men who think they're one of the good ones have no idea how much women especially are trained to give them another chance to redeem themselves. And that's why I say, like, moving forward, absolutely not. Which is very hard, by the way, because it's most people. Most people are like, they're really going through it. So you got to figure it out. But that's why, like, people being like, oh my God, Kyla's such a good debater. These comments are crazy for Kyla. That's great and everything. But be careful about, be careful. And same thing with all those people that left my channel when I was collabing with Destiny. Good for you. Do that. Every time I collab with somebody that you're like, Brittany, do that. If I ever collab with another person that's like a bad person, you should unfollow me. And I should learn that lesson, or I should learn to defend it if I think it's a good reason. But I should not be platforming bad people. And I should do my due diligence before doing it. Just now, right now, I'm doubting myself with even showing you Rationality Rules because I didn't know his trans stance. So let's not watch this as a fan. I'm going to unsubscribe. Let's just watch this in general now. But that even makes me hesitate. Like, fuck. You know, and I can't know everything about everybody, but that's like so annoying to me.
Absurd on its face. But Piers uses this authority to unleash a deluge of nonsense.
Chris Williamson, you may know him, great guy, and he came on my show recently. And he said that all the following things have been blamed on toxic masculinity in the media in the last year and a half. Gang violence, climate change, the financial crisis, Brexit, the election of Donald Trump, not wearing a face mask.
Would you prefer us just to blame men in general? At least with toxic masculinity, we're putting the onus on the system at hand that is ruining masculinity for men to be had in a healthy way. Toxic masculinity isn't even a judgment on men as a gender.
Eating meat, physical fitness, fast food, capitalism, communism, hip-hop, smelling of Axe body spray, being stoic, risk-taking, religion, but also secularism and atheism, playing board games, being interested in cars, and saying hello or have a nice day.
Do I need to point out the obvious? No one thinks that saying hello or using deodorant is toxic. If anything, deodorant tends to deal with a lot of toxic smells. But I digress.
Ugh. Brother, ugh.
And of course, the list contains logical contradictions: religious and atheistic, capitalist and communist. This would discredit any serious arguments.
Let's go back to that.
Religious and atheistic.
Question, what is truth? Atheist philosophers, Christian philosophers, winky Jesus face.
Capitalist.
Capitalist versus communism, police, nightstick on minority. People's police, nightstick on people's minority.
And communist. This would discredit any serious argument immediately, but that's the point. This isn't a real list. It's a prop.
Chat said Erudite's fashion is interesting. Trad wife meets goth. Okay, again, Kyla's very beautiful. We're not like coming for the way she looks. But Kyla and Nick, last time I checked into their relationship a long time ago, they are still Christian. They are actually goth punk. And she is always talking about like her husband, her husband, her husband. So remember that. Remember that she left the church because her brother is gay, but she's still, last time I checked in a couple years ago, identified as some level of Christian. Remember when she and I would collab, I asked her about her Christianity.
Piers isn't trying to prove anything. He's trying to make the entire topic look ridiculous. What we're seeing here is an appeal to ridicule via a straw man. He's using Chris's misrepresentation to make the argument easier to attack, and presenting it as so absurd, it's not worth serious consideration. Remember, this is his response to Kyla's question about whether masculinity is socially emergent.
Do you think that this is like socially emergent, I imagine, to some degree?
He never answered it. Instead, he forced her into new terrain entirely. On the topic of framing, this one stumped me. Trump says Venezuelan airspace should be closed. Now, depending on the outlet, this story...
Oh, it's ground news. I was like, what is this? What a weird transition. Man, this ground news ad, bro. It's always ground news, you know? Whatever. Chat said that he might have made an updated stance to his trans commentary. Okay, we'll just have to keep note of it, I guess.
Is framed in completely different ways. On the left, there's a tendency to immediately question the legitimacy of the operation. And on the right, the tendency is to simply state what Trump has done, with no further context. And I couldn't find a single headline that mentioned the legality of the declaration.
Don't you need to uphold the Constitution of the United States as president?
I don't know.
So if you only read right-leaning sources, you might not realize that this move is illegal. This level of insight is only possible thanks to Ground News. They're a website and app designed to make reading the news easier and more data-driven. Every day, they pull in thousands of articles from all over the world and organize them by story, with each one including visual breakdowns of political bias, reliability, and ownership to give you a clearer sense of how the news is being framed. Returning to this story, Ground News offers more than just headline comparisons. Right away, you can see that it's being covered by over 700 outlets,
Whoa.
with the political balance almost perfect. 31% left, 31% right. Yet the framing is completely different. They even show, bullet by bullet, how left-leaning and right-leaning outlets are presenting the event. And above each headline, you can see the same insights for every specific outlet. That is what makes Ground News essential. It doesn't just tell you what happened, it shows you the different ways that outlets try to shape your view of it. And honestly, those factuality flags alone are indispensable. Right now, you can get 40% off their Vantage plan at ground.news/rationality, or by scanning the QR code on screen. Your subscription supports this channel and helps you spot the spin. Thanks.
and saying hello or have a nice day. So I have already committed at least one crime because I've already said hello to you.
That's
so
true.
my point being,
I'm actually really offended by
become
that
this
too.
Kyla laughs. She has to. If she responds by pointing out the dishonest framing, she looks humorless. She becomes the triggered leftist that Piers' narrative requires. So she plays along.
Watch out there. Kyla and Destiny made sure that they're not crazy leftists. They're liberals. So you better watch out calling her a leftist. See, this is why the framing on Jubilee is so annoying to a lot of us, because these are the same people who build platforms going, I'm not a crazy leftist. We're not the crazy left. We're liberals. We're Zionists. So then it's a conversation about what do you mean when you say leftist?
I'm
actually really offended by that too.
It's a smart de-escalation, but it also gives Piers the time to cement his straw man.
I'm actually really offended by that too.
Sorry?
I said I'm actually very offended by that too.
No, the thing is, I think the point I would make is, I think in a time when young men in particular, I've got 3 sons from 32 to 24, I think we've got to a weird place where they feel like they are the most downtrodden, picked upon people in society.
Having ridiculed the opposing view, Piers now claims the moral high ground. He is the
brother.
defender of the weak. This is crucial because he has now established the filter through which everything Kyla says will be interpreted. If she critiques masculinity from this point forward, she's attacking downtrodden young men.
I think we've got to a weird place where they feel like they are the most downtrodden.
Well, don't worry. With Kyla's work being what it was last time I checked in, I keep saying that because who knows? Maybe the girl changed, you know? Somebody update me. Did she change? I doubt it. She will throw women under the bus for your sons, Piers. Don't worry. I'm making a joke, but that's what happens. In these bubbles, the only way for women to survive is to throw other women under the bus and to make enemies out of other women. Remember, the men are already doing it to themselves, and women are always the main target, but men are doing it to themselves, you know?
Picked upon people in society, with good reason in many cases. And a lot of it is down to this, where they don't know what masculinity is. My argument is, I don't think it's ever been toxic. What's happened is you have men behaving badly, but you also have women behaving badly, and no one calls that toxic femininity.
Bro,
Well,
Give it to you.
I actually do call it toxic femininity. I think when you
Did
look
it?
at, I do.
Kyla lands a small but significant hit. Piers' attempt to use whataboutism, what about women behaving badly, assumes that Kyla will defend women or deny the existence of female toxicity. The obvious implication is that a double standard exists, and if Kyla accepts this frame, it will mark her as a hypocrite. But she sidesteps the trap entirely.
I actually do call it toxic femininity. I think when you
Did
look
it?
at,
You can hear Piers' response. He wasn't expecting consistency. He was expecting an ideal.
but that's okay. Remember when Destiny talked to Jordan Peterson? That was the same thing where Peterson came out really blazing with Destiny, and then Destiny was like kind of playing ball. And then Peterson's like, oh, you're not the leftist I thought you were. Because they're not leftists. They're liberals. Hello? Destiny and Kyla would 100% go on Joe Rogan if he called. I, on principle, cannot go on Joe Rogan. That's the difference. I, on principle, cannot show up to Joe Rogan's podcast. But they would eat that up. They'd be like, this is my opportunity. Which is why if Hassan ever goes on that podcast, but he already does, right? He went on Theo Von's. You know Hassan would go on Joe Rogan's. And I'm saying, no, that is not your job. You're not a politician. Though Kamala Harris should have gone on Joe Rogan because she's going to be the president. You don't need to be on Joe Rogan. You're a YouTuber. That's the dilemma. Are you a YouTuber? Or are you a public speaker and a politician and an activist, right? Because if you're just going on Joe Rogan, like, what is this for? And come on, what is this really for?
Now, notice what Kyla does with this momentary opening. She tries to get back to the foundation.
when you
Did
look
it?
at, I do. When you look at like gender studies and philosophy on this, right? We use this term called masculinities and femininities because we understand that like the like samurai era of masculinity looks very different than maybe the knights of the round table and whatnot.
This is brilliant. She's introducing the concept of masculinities, plural. Why is this so important? Well, if there is only one masculinity, then it is a monolith, an objective standard you measure a person against to decide if they're man enough.
We use this term called masculinities and femininities.
But if there are masculinities, plural, then it becomes a menu, a collection of behaviors exhibited by different cultures that we can examine and choose from. The samurai code of honor? Interesting. Victorian emotional repression? Maybe less healthy. And by comparing samurai to knights of the round table, she is choosing examples that are historically undeniable and politically neutral. Well, at least today.
The like samurai era of masculinity looks very different than maybe the knights of the round table and whatnot. So we understand that masculinity has somewhat morphed and shifted. And in every form of these masculinities or femininities, there are unhealthy elements to each of them. Could you grant me that?
Could you grant me that, she pleads. It's a humble request for a tiny patch of common ground.
Please, sir, will you grant me that? I'm just a silly little woman. Please, sir. Please.
She is asking, can we agree that things change and sometimes have bad parts? If Piers is honestly tracking the argument, he'd say, sure, some elements can be negative. Cultures are different. But Piers isn't here to engage. He's here to disgrace the woke.
Weak, whiny, woke wastrels.
Granting her premise, even a single historical fact, would mean conceding that her argument has merit. He'd lose control of the frame.
And in every form of these masculinities or femininities, there are unhealthy elements to each of them. Could you grant me that?
Well, it depends what you mean. I mean, what do you think masculinity is?
Again, he refuses to answer directly, instead deflecting with a question of his own. Suddenly, Kyla is the one on trial. She has to present a definition for his approval.
What do you think masculinity is?
This is yet another move to control the frame. You see, the person asking questions runs the interview. The person answering is the subject. Piers is an interviewer by trade. He knows that if he stops asking questions, he loses power. So he doesn't answer her. He demands a definition, one that he'll reject before she's even finished.
What do you think masculinity is?
In our society, I think masculinity...
No, not in your society. Just generally, what is it?
Stop. Rewind.
In our society, I think masculinity...
No, not in your society. Just generally, what is it?
This is really quite insidious. Piers demands that Kyla define masculinity, and she begins exactly as she should, defining it as something relative to society.
In our society...
This is, for what it's worth, the nuanced academic way to define a social construct.
To be fair, Kyla is educated. That's a reminder of like how she even got into this space, right? She showed up and said, hey, I'm educated. I have a degree in this. I've done addiction counseling. I am appealing to authority in a sense, like not literally, but in a sense. Have me on your shows, right? And then she uses her work to kind of, this is why she, she specializes in boys. She wants to invest in boys. She wants to intervene. And that's great. Except I do think like men suffering from deep levels of misogyny just like are never going to listen to a woman. I just don't think it's going to happen. And I think like, unless she's intervening with elementary level students, it's not going to matter. And that's why she's holding her breath so hard for these men, which by the way, I was happy to do that when I first met them. Like, I really liked these people when I first met them until I got to know them more. And that's the point. Liking people when you first get to know them, guys, is not the problem. It's what do you do after you get to know them more? And it's like, how much do you have to get to know them before you're like, okay, good luck. I'm not going to, and that's what it is. It's never wrong to like somebody when you first meet them at a D&D event or first see them at the club or first engage with them at work. It's just like, and that's why it's so, kind of like philosophically evil to like almost keep things from people as you get to know them. You can go 5 years without knowing who your friends are because you guys never have conversations, right? It's just like, bro.
You define it by its context. But Piers blocks this immediately. He rejects the very premise of her definition before she can even finish the sentence.
Which, it's so funny because ultimately, I think like her and Piers are more aligned than not aligned. Or maybe not now. Piers is such a, who's a contrarian? Piers Morgan. That's why Piers is so annoying. He's a contrarian.
No, not in your society. Just
generally.
He wants her to define it just generally. Appreciate how rigged this is. Piers insists that she define masculinity as a universal eternal constant, the very thing she is arguing it isn't. So, put bluntly, Piers is insisting that she adopt his worldview in order to even speak with him. He is the bouncer off the club of this conversation, and he's telling her that she can't come in wearing those shoes.
No, not in your society. Just generally, what is it?
Yeah, in North America, we would broadly view it as like...
You can't just say North America. Masculinity is a thing. It's not like territory specific. It has become that way with the toxic element. But actual masculinity, when it was first devised as a word, it's not an American thing, it's a global thing.
There it is, the platonic ideal, the divine form. Piers believes that there is a pure, global, actual masculinity that exists outside of time and space, floating in the ether, untouched by history or culture. But really? I mean, being a man in 13th century Tsushima involved different expectations than being a man in a Nordic raiding party, or a monk in 12th century Tibet, or a tech.
You see how they're saying man and masculinity? And I would say like, why does masculinity mean man? But that's like not this conversation. This conversation is not even thinking about women when they're thinking about masculinity, even though all of us are masculine and feminine in different ways. So that's the other part of it that needs to be deconstructed. Like masculinity is not owned by men. Men do not own masculinity.
CEO in modern America.
I suffer from toxic masculinity. My partner is always like, Brittany, toxic masculinity. I'm like, fuck. Like I also suffer from toxic masculinity. Now, to be fair, maybe gender fluidity, other things play a role in that. But like, Yeah.
Look, to claim otherwise is to deny the entire history of
And what I mean I suffer from, I mean, I've been deconstructing it for a long time, but it was really bad at one point. You know what I mean?
human civilization. You have to be profoundly ignorant. But Piers says it with so much confidence.
It's not an American thing, it's a global thing.
Okay then, Piers has blocked her definition, rejected her context, and retreated to a mystical claim of global masculinity. Kyla realizes that he simply won't let her use a definition that isn't his. So she shifts tactics. If he won't accept a definition, maybe he'll accept a history lesson.
Ooh, Discourse said, is masculinity only a construct or does it exist outside of constructs? Now, this can be debated. I personally find it's both. Like everything else, it's both. Race only exists in a construct, and yet it exists outside of a construct in a sense, but everything is perceived through our brains, which creates constructs. So like, even the fact that we exist is like a construct of existence. Does anything exist outside of perception? And well, you know, that's the question. Like, what does it mean for something to be real? What does it mean for something to exist? Right? Like, you know, a construct is more like a limited or a perimeter-based name around a thing. But like, I think everything sort of is and isn't. And that's the fluidity of life in general that is very hard for people, you know? Very hard even for my brain sometimes, and definitely hard for my brain in the past, right? So that's why I'm trying to be more transparent with what I really think. Like this idea of ugly and beautiful. I know people aren't really ugly, and yet I know what it is to be ugly. And I know what it's like to feel ugly. And I know what it's like to, you know, and I think like it's a disconnect. A part of it is like we're using limited language to express something that's so like deeply felt, which is why you can watch films that are silent, films with no dialogue, and get exactly the meaning, because our emotions, our emoting is so like real that we can process what's happening. It's like, that's how beautiful human beings are. Like you don't even have to have words and you'd be like, I know what's happening. I don't even need language, but the language is in our body. It's in our expression. So like, even what is language? You know, that whole debate that is, oh my God, forever going to happen is listening to an audiobook reading. It's like, well, obviously by definition, it is not reading. And obviously by another definition, it is certainly consuming a book, which we would just shorthand as reading a book. And yes, I agree that when I read books, it's the difference between being in the driver's seat and being in the passenger seat when I listen to audiobooks. And yes, I do learn more, comprehend information better, my vocabulary is better, my memory is better. Everything about my life is better when I'm physically reading books versus audiobooks. And yet, I think it's just as good of an experience, or at least not enough. You don't have to compare them, is what I'm saying, to be the passenger listening to someone reading you the book, right? Or just listening to an audiobook. Like, you know, it's the difference between your partner reading a book out loud for you, you know, you listening to it. Like I would say my partner read me the book. So yeah, I didn't read it, but my partner read it, so I've read it. But it's like, what you're really asking when people say, did you read the book? They're saying, do you know the context of the book so we can talk about it? And the answer is yes, if I've listened to the audiobook. But there's like always this debate forever and ever that will happen. You know, what does reading really mean? And I'm like, you guys are having like totally different conversations.
Not an American thing, it's a global thing.
Do you think that Athenian masculinity and Spartan masculinity were the same in the Greeks?
That right there is the silver bullet, the perfect question to puncture Piers' fragile understanding of masculinity. It's concrete. It's not about feelings or society generally, but two specific groups of people. It's historical, relying on records rather than speculation. And everyone, and I mean everyone, even people who only know history from the movie 300, knows the answer. The Spartans were militaristic, austere, communal, and obsessed with physical prowess. The Athenians were democratic, philosophical, artistic, and mercantile. Their versions of how to be a man were radically famous.
And both were gay. So what does that tell you? Men are gay.
Different. They fought wars over these differences. Intentionally or not, Kyla has led Piers straight into a double bind. Piers has two options. He can admit that they were different, which forces him to admit that masculinity is socially constructed and collapses his never toxic claim, or he can claim that they were the same, which would be historically illiterate.
Hold on. Chad said it's ableist to claim reading audiobooks doesn't count as reading, period. Yeah, but not to be autistic. It is literally not what reading is. You know what I mean? So like, it is funny enough, like I think like almost just like a stupid conversation because no one's being honest about things. There's a literalness to reading that exists. Like I am telling you, it's an action. So I saw a girl say, I read 100 books this year, and people are like, it doesn't count, it's fiction. guys, with peace and love, I'm so sick of these. Like, you decide what rule you want to keep, but like, reading is reading, but not everything is reading. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, Chet says a blind person can read still. It's called Braille. No, stop. You're doing it. You're all doing it right now. You're not hearing what I'm saying. There's a difference between a literal action of a word associated in a bubble and you using language in a way that conveys what I know what you mean. And I'm saying we're all getting stuck in the fact that this word doesn't mean this thing. What's the difference from a hit and a slap? Do you know the differences between somebody hitting you and someone slapping you? It's different. Even though you would say it's the same, it's literally different. But that's the difference. And I'm saying it's not much of a difference, but if you're going to be very pedantic, there is a difference. Yes, okay? And I'm saying we should be acknowledging it's both things. It's not one or the other. It's dependent on the bubble. It's dependent on the perspective. Because you limit yourself when you say things like, because you're not allowing for the details of it to all come together and for the experiences to be validated. Because you're not allowing a chance of saying how you read something can change things. I just told you, studies have been coming out. You are literally you're benefiting more from reading a book visually than not reading a book visually. You literally benefit more. Or at least, definitely I do, but from what I've heard from the internet, at least, it seems to be true that for a lot of people, it's very important. When you talk about Alzheimer's, when you talk about mental health, when you talk about brain fog, it seems to make a big difference. And I'm not saying you are less because you're doing a different method. I'm saying the methods offer different perks and benefits. One is not better than the other unless you are looking for a particular outcome. Okay? So everybody is different. And then you take into consideration how you learn. Are you visual? Are you ADHD? Are you dyslexic? You know what I mean? Like, again, the reason you see TikToks of people trying to reset their attention span by reading a book is because it is like a different skill. It is a different relationship reading a book than listening to a pod where you're working out at the same time. Okay? So again, no judgment, but I understand why you think it's coming from judgment. But there is some like data, like when I think about how to avoid Alzheimer's and can we reduce it, and why is Alzheimer's found in so many AFAB people, I'm trying to like see what the science tells me is the possibility. And if they're like read books, I'm reading some fucking books. If they're like it's the work of actually like reading and comprehending, I'm gonna read some books. You know what I mean? That's it. But I'm not saying you're worse because you read audiobooks. I love it. I listen to audiobooks. Love it. Love blind people reading Braille. Love all of that. But they're different methods. Like, how do you grow glutes? Well, there's like 5 different exercises you can do, and each exercise offers a different relationship with growing your glutes, right?
And make him look foolish. So what does he do?
Do you think that Athenian masculinity and Spartan masculinity were the same in the Greeks?
I think masculinity has never changed. All that's changed is the interpretation of it.
That's right, he chose to be historically illiterate and to look foolish. Piers is trying to separate the essence of masculinity from the practice of masculinity. He's saying that the thing itself is eternal, like gravity. But here's the thing, gravity doesn't change based on interpretation. Gravity pulls you down whether you're a Spartan or an Athenian.
I think masculinity has never changed. All that's changed is the interpretation of it.
And what he hasn't realized is that by pointing to changing interpretations, he's inadvertently accepted Kyler's claim. You see, if the interpretation of masculinity changes such that cultures conceptualize it differently, to the point where one group writes poetry and debates philosophy while another throws babies off cliffs and forbids money, then functionally, they are multiple masculinities. Call them interpretations if you like, call them cultural expressions. The label doesn't matter. The point stands. Masculinity is not a single fixed universal practice. It varies. Hilariously, then, Piers thinks he's contradicting Kyler, but logically, he is agreeing with her in substance. All he's really done is reject her vocabulary. And notice, Piers still hasn't answered the question about Sparta, because he knows, on some level, that he's standing on a trapdoor. That's why he's sprinting away from this philosophical failure into the warm embrace of victimhood.
I think masculinity has never changed. All that's changed is the interpretation of it. And what I can't abide is this modern phenomenon that everything about masculinity, everything about being a man, which I am currently identifying as, everything about me is supposedly toxic.
This is a defensive flair. Piers is making it personal, playing the victim and daring Kyler to attack him. I am a man. Are you calling me toxic? It forces Kyla to stop her intellectual advance to reassure him.
Oh
She
my
now
God. He needs her to reassure him, guys.
has to switch from professor to therapist.
Everything about me is supposedly toxic.
So I would reject the idea that everything that masculinity is toxic. I think that there can be bad elements of anything.
And there it is. Piers has succeeded in controlling the frame
Damn,
again. Kyla
bro.
clarifies her position,
Because they're not really like, I mean, ultimately, they're not going to disagree in the way that they think. But it's like, it is kind of funny. But Piers is so bad faith.
rejecting the woe is me straw man that he's built. But notice what's happened in the momentum. The pressure is off Piers entirely. Instead of pinning him on history and interpretation, she's now having to explain that she doesn't hate men, which is exactly the angle that Piers latches onto to avoid returning to where he's weakest.
I would reject the idea that everything that masculinity is toxic. I think that there can be bad elements of anything.
What do you like about men?
Just look at how far we've drifted.
Man, what do you like about men? It's so good. It's so bad.
The claim from Piers is that masculinity has never been toxic.
Masculinity has never been toxic.
The question that Kyla placed on the table is whether the masculinities of Sparta and Athens are the same.
Do you think that Athenian masculinity and Spartan masculinity were the same in the Greeks?
But
Tell me, Piers, what do you like about men? Say it slowly in like a whisper voice, too. Go ahead. Do you like their muscles, their brain? Do you like the way they look in those kilts? I really like those kilts. Ethan knows. Ethan's the epitome of manliness. He would not Hassan Piker. I don't like men who look like Hassan. Too girly, if you ask me.
somehow, the current topic that he's wandered off to is, Kyla, tell me nice things about men.
What do you like about men?
This is a red herring, introducing irrelevant information to distract from the argument at hand. What Kyla likes about men, quite obviously, has zero relevance to whether masculinity is socially constructed or whether it can be toxic. But Kyla is gracious. She decides to play ball. And honestly, she plays it beautifully.
What do you like about men?
What do I like about them? Lots of things. I think that like the idea of protectionism is good. I think the willingness to kind of like self-sacrifice is very tied to the version of masculinity we have. I think that that's a very good thing. I think the desire to provide is also a really good thing.
She lists the hits.
I think that that's a very good thing. I think the desire to provide is also a really good.
Gross. The desire to provide. I hate provider language. I hate it. It's so gross.
Thing.
She lists the hits. Protection, self-sacrifice, desire to provide.
Oh,
This is a
brother.
crucial moment for those watching. Peers, and indeed most conservatives, often paint a picture of the left as a group of blue-haired harpies who want to castrate all men.
Just a reminder, Kyla is not a progressive. So she's not going to be debating from that perspective. She is not a progressive. So do not think of her that way, right? She is not a progressive.
And banish them to an island. Kyla just shattered that caricature. She is sitting there, identifying as a leftist, praising the virtues of traditional masculinity. With her short list, this undercuts the idea that all masculinity is toxic. In theory, this should allow the discussion to return to whether certain elements are toxic. But Piers has other plans.
I think the desire to provide.
Hold on, Chatter. I'm not mad. You said I made my comment in good faith, so it's kind of crazy. You have to get mad about it. Just saying some people, audiobooks are the only way we consume books. That's why I say ableist. I'm not mad. I'm autistic. If you're talking to me, I'm not mad. I'm autistic. I'm literally not even angry. I really enjoy this conversation. It's one of my favorite conversations to have. I'm just autistic. That's just what I sound like. That's it. That's literally what it is. People always think I'm angry. I'm literally so happy right now. I'm literally just so happy. If I was angry, I would tell you. I'm not. I'm just autistic. I know. I've dealt with this my whole life. I promise you I'm not angry.
Is also a really good thing, and stand up for like principles and strength. I think all of these things
kind of
are
agree
wonderful
there.
things. Well, the
Do
issue.
you like men to be hunters, providers, protectors?
I don't really care about them being hunters.
Really? Well, how are they going to get all these things to help you and protect you?
In this economy, I'd prefer them just to be like physically capable.
He's trying to box her in. What's that? You like men being providers? Then you must accept the hunter-killer archetype. It's a false dichotomy, presenting only two options when more exist. The problem for Piers is that we don't live in hunter-gatherer societies anymore, do we? I mean, I don't know if anyone's actually told Piers, but it's been a few thousand years. Kyla doesn't take the bait.
And I hear you, Chad. I hear you. You said, dang, I'm autistic, or dog, I'm autistic too. I just thought you were being dismissive. I'm not. I don't mean to sound dismissive either. I'm not. I just think like, for me, the greatest part of existence is seeing all the thousands of ways we can have relationships with language and the way we so intuitively limit ourselves. We just so easily limit ourselves. Is audiobook reading? Don't you see the trap in that question? It's a trap question. It's a trick question. It's not a real question. It makes you defensive. You end up battling things. You feel bad. You call out ableism. But it's a really good question if you ask it in a different way. Is there a functional difference? Is there an experience difference between reading something by holding a book and spelling paper and listening to it in your ears or when you're in the shower? I mean, everything is different. The texture is different. The smells are different. The physical sensations are different. The way your brain processes it is different. The memories you build in doing this activity are different. Everything we do is different. If reading was the same, then I could say Braille and reading, how are they different? Obviously, they're different. Even reading Braille, that's so fucking cool, but it's a different experience. Otherwise, you're co-opting an experience and saying, oh, I know what that's like. I don't know what that's like. I have no idea what it's like to read Braille. Sounds cool, though. But do you see when you say, like, it's the same, it doesn't make sense? It can't be the same. Now, when you say, is it the same for a certain functionality, we can have that conversation, but it depends on what your goal is when having this experience. That's all I mean. It's just like I just don't want to limit the experience because it feels so obvious to me that like every single thing gives you a different relationship. You know, I learned this about working out. Gym life is so interesting now that I'm getting back into it, especially. There are so many workouts for the same muscle group. So everyone always says like, oh, I don't like working out because I don't like doing Bulgarian squats. Cool. There are like 7 other workouts you can do other than Bulgarian squats. But if you're not doing Bulgarian squats, you do not understand it. Because girl, let me just tell you. Okay? So you can't go around telling people like, oh, I do squats, so I understand Bulgarian. No. No. You understand one variation of a squat. You know? And I'm just saying like, you can get your glutes big on so many different variations of exercise, but every single one is a different experience. And we should choose the one that benefits us the most and gets us what we need the most. And other people shouldn't use it to feel superior to you. I'm better than you. I read fiction books. I'm better than you. I read fantasy. I'm better than you. I do XYZ. It's not about being superior, but see how this conversation always turns into that? Do you read books or do you listen to audiobooks? It's like, girl, stop. Don't ask me a stupid question. Because now I know you're just making it into a competition. Because like, there's no reason for this judgment, right? So then it puts us on the defense, so we can't even have the real conversation. The real conversation is, do you see any benefits to audiobook versus reading a book, like paper book? Actually, I do. Thank you so much for asking. It seems for me, I do see a greater benefit, but for convenience sake, it honestly is really nice to listen to audiobooks. That's all I was saying.
Instead, she drags the definition of provider out of the Stone Age and into the modern economy.
In this economy, I'd prefer them just to be like physically capable.
With time on the clock running down, Kyla does something that most people can't. When you've been dragged through 3 different tangents, it's easy to forget where you started, lost in the weeds of irrelevant questions and pity appeals. But Kyla has clearly recognized the weakness. She drags him back to the issue that he never answered.
In this economy, I'd prefer them just to be like physically capable. Let's go back to the Athenians. Let's go back to Athenians and Spartans.
Yes, Kyla, this is how you fight frame control. You politely, relentlessly return to the scene of the crime.
Let's go back to Athenians and Spartans, though, right? If you want to say masculinity has always been the same, well, the issue is history would disagree with you, right? In Athens, for example, it was completely normal for you to participate in civility and talk and do philosophy, but Spartan men, for example, wouldn't even touch coins, right? They viewed it as a very different thing.
She lays it out crystal clear. In Athens, philosophy, civility, and discourse were manly. In Sparta, touching money was unmanly. Both societies considered these the height of masculinity in their respective contexts. This demonstrates, undeniably, that masculinity is varied across time and space. Piers has nowhere to go. The logic is airtight. The history is sound. So, what does he say? Does he concede? Does he say, fair point, there are variations?
But Spartan men, for example, wouldn't even touch coins, right? They viewed it as a very different thing.
What's that got to do with them being masculine?
This is the moment the NPC glitches, using the wrong dialogue line. Kyla just explained, in specific detail, how these societies defined masculinity differently. She's just explained exactly what it has to do with being masculine. And Piers asks, what?
Purposely misunderstanding people? Wait, Chad said insert TikToker from earlier about contrarians and competitive people, and insert TikToker from earlier about people who purposely misunderstand you. Piers Morgan, debate bro bubbles. These purposely, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
What does that have to do with masculinity?
What's that got to do with them being masculine?
It's like a chef explaining how flour and water make dough, and then Piers charges in and says, what does that have to do with bread? I think the chef would have the right to say,
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
By asking, what does that have to do with it, Piers attempts to sever the logical link that Kyla just built. He's back.
By the way, as much as we love those cultural moments on TV, the food industry is incredibly misogynistic and incredibly abusive. Even Gordon Ramsay's mentor, who made him cry infamously, they're all very abusive. So as much as we like to laugh at the idiot sandwich memes, just for the record, that should never happen at your place of employment or in a competition or in any capacity. Thank you.
Banking on his confidence to overwhelm her logic, hoping that the audience
Also, I just found out they had a Croatian MasterChef, and I'm gonna start watching it. They don't have the subtitles from what I saw, but I should just start watching it, learn my Croatian that way.
won't stop to notice that he's asking a nonsense question. Kyla, though, doesn't blink. She doesn't throw up her hands in exasperation. She assumes, perhaps naively, that he genuinely doesn't understand. So she explains it again, and she brings reinforcements.
What's that got to do with them being masculine?
Well, because the version of masculinity that they had viewed certain things like commerce as feminine. If you go to samurais, they viewed poetry as masculine. Whereas if you go to like Victorian era, poetry is often associated with femininity.
If Piers
Actually, that's true that Ramsay is nicer outside of America, and all of them are. All the master chefs are so much better outside of America. Guys, it's us. America is a problem. We are so violent. We are so angry. We're so mean. We're so mean. The contestants are so mean to each other. That's why I don't like watching American Master Chef. They're so mean to each other. I'm like, oh my God, it's us, bro. It's us.
won't touch the Spartans and Athenians, maybe he'll engage with the samurai and the Victorians. She's stacking the evidence. For the samurai, poetry was masculine, part of the warrior culture. For the Victorians, poetry was effeminate, associated with sensitivity.
See, when men do hair, it's masculine. When women do hair, it's feminine. Guys, it's either or, both, none. For me, masculine and feminine are vibes. Aesthetics, vibes. Again, it depends on the way we're viewing it, of course. It's either, again, are we doing mask aesthetic, mask energy, fem energy? Are we doing the aesthetic, like, oh, you look mask, but you're actually fem? Or actually, are you fem energy with a fem presentation? Like, it's all dependent. It's just all dependent on how you have a relationship with these things. And I think that's what people keep missing too. Like, and it depends on the bubble. It depends on the culture. It shifts and changes. But obviously, again, and I know people have a problem with this because they're like, you want to like deconstruct yourself into nothingness, right? That's like the goal for some people. And I think the most you can deconstruct yourself into is like, well, you can't deconstruct yourself out of your brain, but you can deconstruct yourself through meditation into sort of like a part of like a tree or a leaf. But see how a tree and a leaf are still a tree and a leaf? You know, and that's why I think it's kind of interesting. But again, I think there's like, this is such a layered conversation. Who knows where anyone is at in the conversation? I mean, there are people who still can't understand gayness. You know what I mean? So who knows who's where, you know? But yeah, it's so interesting, huh? All of this.
Distinct from the stiff upper lip that it demanded of men. Same activity, writing poems, but opposite gender associations. These are yet more examples that masculinity is socially constructed. She's proving it over and over again, bludgeoning him with history. But Piers remains as dense as Victorian hardtack.
Whereas if you go to like Victorian
Oh
era,
my God, is it just on me right now? Jesus, fuck me. Sorry.
poetry is often
Masculinity is socially constructed. She's proving it over and over again, bludgeoning him with history. But Piers remains as dense as Victorian hardtack.
Whereas if you go to like Victorian era, poetry is often associated with femininity.
But what does any of that got to do with toxic masculinity?
Piers must be feigning stupidity at this point. It's too obvious to be anything else. He is losing on history. He is losing on logic. So he abandons the battlefield entirely. But the answer to his question is simple. Kyla is building a syllogism. Masculinity is constructed by society, as proven by Sparta and the samurai. If society constructs it, society can construct healthy versions or unhealthy versions. Therefore, some versions, like Victorian repression, can be...
Hold on, chat. I don't mean to be like so anal about language. You said deconstruct gender outside out of the binary. I have a relationship with gender that's wholesome and true and real. Have a relationship with life that's wholesome and true and real. Have a relationship with everything that is joyful and beautiful. Deconstruct to learn more, not to destroy or take away. And this is always the conversation. Like, if we deconstruct gender, does that mean I'm not a boy? No. You can be a boy who's deconstructed. You can also be a very typical and masculine man and have it be valid. Jean pants, boots, shit on your shoes, and a cowboy hat. It's just, how did you arrive there? Right? Like, we're not trying to, and I think that's maybe what you meant, but I'm not sure. But like, we're not trying to run away from ourselves. We're trying to run towards ourselves. We're trying to run closer to ourselves. The world has taught us our whole life to run away from ourselves. And I'm saying we should run closer to ourselves and our real self, not the self that feels like it has to change to fit into this description of what it is good to be, under the construct of Christianity, it's like, oh, I was a bisexual, but, I found the Lord and I'm no longer bisexual. Okay, that feels like running away from yourself than more towards yourself. You know what I mean? Like, all things are valid as long as it's more towards yourself instead of away from yourself. More towards yourself. And then we'll talk about what is real or what isn't real. Realness is a construct as well. The word real is a very convoluted, very layered word, which is why these debates are so funny. Piers is making the argument that masculinity was never toxic, but we would say, in what reality is that ever true? Like, even the word real is doing so much heavy lifting when we're having these conversations, which is why when you start to I'm trying to understand personally what is actually real, but even I know that construct needs to be deconstructed without losing our minds, without becoming crazy, without believing things that aren't true. How do I know this is real, and what does real even mean? What does it even mean? And can it be real in different layers? My partner is the most amazing person I've ever met, and they're just some guy. My partner is the most amazing person I met, and they're my soulmate, and it's magical, and the universe brought us together. And she's just a girl I met on Discord. Relax. Yes, you are the best person I have ever met. I love you more than I love everyone else. Also chill. I have a family. It's these things are all true. It's the idea that one is true and one is always true and nothing else is true. All things are true at once. It's and that's what people get down to, I think it becomes this story we have to tell ourselves to feel like we found it. We finally found it, the real truth. Maybe.
Unhealthy or toxic. She needs to establish the premises to support her conclusion, but Piers keeps demanding that she skip straight to the end so that he can yell at her about hating men. He's trying to burn the bridge while she's still crossing it.
But what does any of that got to do with toxic masculinity?
Because if we look at masculinity, we have to acknowledge that it is emergent out of a society that we are participating in. When I said, well, in North America, you rejected that, and I go, well, that's the foundational piece of this.
Kyla calls him out. This is a key moment. She explicitly names his evasion. She says, I tried to tell you it was North American. You rejected that. So I had to go to history to prove to you that culture matters.
But hang on, you got to say North America.
She's exposing the mechanism, pulling back the curtains, and showing the audience the gears of the conversation. Essentially, she's only having to go this slow because Piers refused to accept the obvious.
Well, that's the foundational piece of this. What we're talking about, toxic masculinity, is essentially a North American version of masculinity that we seem to not like.
Well, no.
She lands the plane. The toxic stuff isn't all masculinity. It's a specific, local, cultural version that isn't working for us anymore. Piers needs an out. He needs a way to escape this relentless logic. And he finds it in the most reliable escape hatch of the 21st century. The culture war.
Is essentially a North American version of masculinity that we seem to not like.
Well, no, it's not. It's a symptom of, and forgive my phraseology here, but it's a symptom of weak, whiny, woke wastrels who've decided they're going to revise what masculinity is.
Weak, whiny, woke wastrels. Alliteration, insult, buzzwords. We've left.
You think you practice that in front of the mirror? How people do speech practices before they go on stage? Do you think you practice that in front of the mirror?
Around with debate, and we've entered his safe space of talk show theatre. Piers realizes that he can't argue about samurai. He can't argue about Spartans. So he attacks a phantom. He conjures up an image of a weak, whiny wastrel, someone pathetic, someone annoying, someone the audience is primed to despise. He frames the critique of masculinity not as a historical analysis, but as a conspiracy by weak people to drag strong people down.
Weak, whiny, woke wastrels who've decided they're going to revise what masculinity is.
I think it's a generational trauma.
Hang on, I'll give you a chance to respond. And they're going to make all men feel terrible. They're going to make men hate themselves. They're going to make everybody else hate men. And at that point, I'm like, what are you doing here? Why would women, for example, want their men to be weak, whiny, woke wastrels?
This is a straw man again.
Oh,
Kyla just told him
brother.
that she likes protection, strength, and provision. She explicitly stated she values those things. And Piers looks her in the eyes and says, why do you want men to be weak?
Why would women, for example, want their men to be weak, whiny, woke wastrels?
Piers is arguing with a goat.
Actually, do you guys know this TikTok trend that keeps happening where I'm not a fan of it, though there's a little chuckle that happens. It's not a safe chuckle in this space where a girl will tell a story about the way her man acted feminine. I don't know. Forgive me. That's not the way I would read the story myself, but that's the way the audience hears it. And then in the caption, they'll show a man dressed as Cinderella coming down the stairs. And they're like, this your man? Do you guys know this bubble? And like, you know, I love a good petty joke, but ultimately, like, you know, showing your man like with his nails done or grabbing his purse as if to say like a man can't be feminine is like not interesting to me. You know what I mean? And look, I've always brought home boys that all my brothers were like, dude, you just like the girly boys, don't you? And I'm like, I do. And like, I don't even date high femme men, but I do date men that typically are seen as more like feminine generally than like not. Like if you had to play the game of, you know, regular conservative masculinity and like blah, blah, blah. But then even with that said, compared to like a femboy, I'm not dating that much of a femboy. You know what I'm saying? Because a femboy is like, I mean, to be fair, a femboy is a trope, but it's like when we have these conversations, I don't know, it just feels like this isn't the direction I want to go in. And look, there's like a lot of TikToks that are going viral right now about a lot of women being homophobic and people saying like, hey, stop. Oh my God, these fireworks are crazy. Happy New Year. But like, I don't want to play into that either. But I think it's interesting, like the way to have, this is why I say don't talk to Piers Morgan. Don't talk to these people because they make you say things you might not even mean. Not that I don't think Kylie means it, but they would make you say things you don't even mean. And that's just to get them, just to agree with them. And then they'll go, see, you agreed with me. So I win. And it's like so frustrating. That's why I don't think like these things are good. I just don't think this series Jubilee does is good. I don't think people should do it. And I think it feels clout chasey to do it personally. I know it's good for your job. I do. I recognize that, which is why I say, guys, I leave money on the table all the time. You know, a lot of people get DMs. I remember Kat Black saying this too. She got an email from Jubilee and Jubilee's like, and she was like, no, I'm not going to do your show, bro. Cause I know you just want me to come on this show and talk about being a trans woman and you just want to use me as like clickbait. I'm not going to do it. And that's the difference. The difference between the people who say yes to Jubilee and the people who don't say yes. And remember that. Remember how many of us are leaving money on the table, opportunities on the table, because we're like, absolutely not. I know what this is. I will not be a part of this. And just remember which people, boys, who often will be more than willing to engage in this bubble and or girls who are still deconstructing.
He is arguing with a Twitter thread that he read 3 years ago. He is not arguing with the person in front of him. He never was. But Kyla refuses to get baited into an insult match. She does something empathetic. She brings up trauma.
Why would women, for example, want their men to be weak, whiny, woke wastrels?
Well, I think the issue that you're neglecting here is the high levels of intergenerational trauma amongst men. I mean, if we go back to World War II, it's followed by the Vietnam War, right? We see men dying by the thousands, and then they come back and they have PTSD, and then they go off again and die by the thousands. And so when we look at like the lack of masculinity and masculine role models, we have to understand this through a lens of understanding that like men have been like scooped out and killed over and over, and then when they come back, they're destroyed. And there isn't really an answer for men.
This is an excellent insight. She is arguing that what we call toxic often stems from unaddressed trauma. Men were sent into the meat grinders of the 20th century, came back broken, and were told to suck it up. This was the principle.
Whoa, what a picture.
Into the meat grinders of the 20th century, came back broken.
Damn, bro. Stress is a killer. I don't know how to like make it clear to everybody. And this is why, guys, I'm so sorry. Going back to everything we talked about today, and today was such a good stream. Everything we've talked about is this: the way you look, the way your house is, the way you feel about yourself. Stress is literally killing you. Sleeping, paying bills, having children. I don't know how to make it more clear. As much as you think it's not connected, it is. So yes, and this is why One Piece is so good. You don't want to be a celestial dragon. You feel me? You don't want to be the elites who are like, oh, I enslaved the peasants. You don't want to be celestial dragons. But you also don't want to be out here in the gutter, okay? You deserve more than the gutter. You just don't want to be these losers up here either, because they think they're better than you, but they're losers, and you know it. You know these rich losers are losers, but that doesn't matter. Stress is killing you. And that's the point. I feel like, you know, Tucker Carlson said this. He said, you have to convince the peasants that they don't want to be in the castle with you. But I think the new trick is to convince you that you don't deserve basic fucking rights, basic fucking living, that you don't deserve good teeth or good hair or good skin. And not at the point of overconsumption and buying everything Sephora has to offer you, but just at the point of not, you know, stressing yourself out to such a point where it shows on your literal face. You know what I mean? Like, girl, okay? I feel like Gotta find a happy place, guys.
And were told to suck it up. This was the principle of Victorian Stoicism, the stiff upper lip, and they passed that hardness down to their sons. Kyla is expressing deep sympathy for men. She is framing men as victims of history, not villains.
And then when they come back, they're destroyed. And there isn't really an answer for men. I agree that there's a systemic lacking of answer on the left for men in a lot of ways.
She hands him an olive branch. It is a moment of vulnerability, a moment of rapport. And Piers takes that branch and snaps it over his knee.
There's a systemic lacking of answer on the left for men in a lot of ways. The issue is that we can't address the problem.
Piers ignores the history of war. He ignores the trauma. He ignores the nuance. He latches onto the word left and unloads his real thesis. It is a breathtaking rejection of the complexity she just offered. She talks about Vietnam veterans with PTSD. He responds with, your side hates guys. Kyla tries to stop him. She sees where this is going. She sees the bad faith train leaving the station. She tries to pull...
Oh, Chad said this is the video I had seen that made me ask about her being a grifter. Oh, I don't think Kyla is a grifter. I think she thinks this is the only way to make her career work because in that bubble, this is what they do. I don't think Kyla's a grifter yet. I think the problem, again, I know this sounds a little weird, but she's not a capitalist, Kyla, as far as I know. Right? You said even her aesthetics signal something weird. I mean, her aesthetics just signal Christian girly who never got to dress cute growing up. So she's doing it now in her 30s. She grew up really Christian. You know what I mean? She's just like, she looks like most of us did after we came out of religion, even though she's still kind of in it. She's like dressing like herself now. She dyed her hair black. She got piercings. She like looks cute with collars. She's been doing her makeup different. She wears cute dresses now instead of like trying to look professional. She like actually like enjoys her life. Now, I'm not saying this to defend Kyla. I'm saying like, in my opinion, feels pretty basically like classic move. Now I'm waiting for her to get past this and keep going. Cause like she already came out of like, but see, the thing is like, I don't know. Again, I don't check in with her like that, but you know, Chet said, I'm pretty sure she said she's a pro-capitalist liberal. Oh, she might be actually. That might be right. She doesn't feel like, okay, let me say it this way. Ethan isn't a grifter. Ethan Klein is not a grifter. He's worse than not a grifter. He believes what he says. Sometimes we think if you really believe what you say, you're a better person, but I don't think so. It's almost better to be a grifter because a grifter you can convince to go in a different direction with the right paycheck. At least you can make a deal with a grifter. Ethan and I think Kyla actually believe themselves, which is a little bit more embarrassing. To be honest, it's like a little bit more embarrassing. It's like, damn, this isn't even a grift. This is real for you? Like you're in it. You know, you're in it. But then there's a compassion there because like, oh, damn, you like really believe this. And then it's a whole thing. It's like a whole back and forth of like, and by really believe this, I don't mean that they really believe, you know how conservatives say we care about children, but then they'll throw children under the bus? They don't really believe children matter. They really believe you're wrong though. And they really believe they're right. And that's what they really believe. They really believe you're wrong and they're right. And that's sad. That's the part that's like, damn.
The emergency brake. But Piers has a...
But Piers gives grifter. Piers gives no genuine, authentic perspective because he's always been a contrarian. He's always been a debater. He's always gone towards the paycheck.
Full head of steam.
I think the left hate men. I mean,
Just to pause you.
They do. Even movies like Barbie.
Barbie. We've gone from the Battle of Thermopylae and the Samurai Bushido to the Barbie movie.
You guys ever think about dying?
This is a red herring deployed once more.
Wait, Discord said she doesn't feel insincere. She doesn't feel insincere for her perspective. She feels like Kyla's always masking. Remember, her dad is autistic, and I think her brother might be autistic. Because when we talked, she's like, you remind me of my father who's autistic. And I'm like, I think Kyla's neurodivergent, right? So if Kyla's neurodivergent, and she actually is neurodivergent, she has a TBI, okay? So if she's a neurodivergent, and she's masking in public because she knows she's debating these boys, then what you might be reading is like the persona she puts on to get through these debates. But the real Kyla, like the authentic Kyla, can't show up on Jubilee, guys. They would destroy her. So she's built this persona over time this like the way to be to get to this point, which is a level of success, by the way. There's some props you have to give her to being able to survive this far along, because it's really hard in this bubble. But I do think she genuinely believes, at least from the talks we had in private especially, she seemed to express to me like a genuine belief that like her calling is to like help boys. And that's just not my calling. I don't believe in it. I don't believe in that idea. But, you know, you do you. If this is what you think is right, like it's your journey.
We are now debating the criticism of a movie about a plastic doll. The distance between this topic and the one point that Kyla has been making, that masculinity is different across cultures, it can only be measured in light years.
They do. Even movies like Barbie.
I'm left.
Okay, here's a little secret for you. I'm slightly left. I'm an old-fashioned liberal.
Do you hate men?
A perfect checkmate. The logic has him trapped because the claims are already at odds with themselves. If the left hate men,
I think the left hate men.
and if Piers claims he is left,
I'm slightly left.
then Piers must hate men. It's beautifully simple.
Do you hate men?
Piers realizes that he stepped in it, so he just babbles through, reclaiming his title as a liberal to distance himself from the woke, effectively playing a shell game with his own political identity.
I'm an old-fashioned liberal.
Do you hate men?
I'm not a. You see, they all think probably I'm a right-wing headbanger. I'm not. I'm an old-fashioned liberal. I believe in
Well, but old-fashioned liberals are conservatives now.
liberalism, and I believe there's nothing wrong with being feminine or masculine. I hate the way that masculinity has been tarred with this brush of everything about it is toxic.
No one cares, Piers. Anyway.
Nobody cares.
Anyway, Kyla has another card to play. She wants to talk about Stoicism, specifically the difference between the philosophical school and the damaging emotional repression often confused with it.
I hate the way that masculinity has been tarred with this brush of everything about it is toxic.
I agree. But the issue is that you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You have to look at things like Victorian Stoicism and recognize how that has harmed young men. Because
Stoicism? Don't be ridiculous.
Hold on.
Piers is shocked that anyone could criticize the noble virtue of Stoicism, but Kyla was and remains precise.
Because
Stoicism? Don't be ridiculous.
Hold on. Victorian Stoicism, not Greek, not Greco-Stoicism.
Stoicism.
She makes the distinction. Greek Stoicism, like that of Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, is about emotional regulation and logic. Victorian Stoicism is about suppression and silence. They are different. Piers ignores her distinction and conflates them.
Victorian Stoicism, not Greek, not Greco-Stoicism.
Stoicism generally is a good trait.
I love Stoicism, Hellenistic Stoicism, not Greek.
Piers is still trying to muddy the waters, even as she seeks
It's
to.
just because he doesn't know anything she's saying. Like, she's talking and Piers is like, fuck, I don't even know what that means. Right? Are we under the impression that Piers Morgan understands anything she's saying? There's no way.
clarify. And then he reaches for his trump card, a piece of paper, the undeniable proof.
I love Stoicism, Hellenistic Stoicism, not Greek.
Well, let me read you something. You've raised Stoicism. The American Psychological Association released a set of guidelines to help psychologists work with men and boys, in which it stated that male masculine traits like stoicism, competitiveness, achievement, eschewal of the appearance of weakness, adventure, and risk should all be discarded.
Piers reads the list with sneering contempt. He presents the APA, the leading body of psychology in the US, as declaring war on adventure and achievement. He is framing it as an attack on excellence itself. But here is where the editors of Jubilee step in. While Piers is reading his sanitized, cherry-picked version of the text, a graphic appears on screen. A fact check. Let's read it. Traditional masculinity, such as emotional stoicism, homophobia, not showing vulnerability, self-reliance, and competitiveness, might deter them from forming close relationships with male peers. Quite the difference, huh? The APA doesn't warn against stoicism generally. It warns against emotional stoicism, along with homophobia, suppressing vulnerability, and hypercompetitiveness. Piers translates this as achievement and adventure. How is attacking gay people an adventure?
Achievement, adventure, and risk should all be discarded.
Piers is lying. He is looking at a document that says suppressing vulnerability is bad for mental health and telling the audience confidently that they want to ban adventure. It is the clearest evidence yet.
Ooh, have you noticed that's the new talking point? That's the Scott Galloway. Adventure, go make mistakes, go out there. Listen, I watch anime. I like adventure. I've solo traveled. I like adventure. I've done a lot of things in my life. I like adventure. But let me tell you this, the way you adventure matters. The way you seek excitement matters. The way you seek freedom matters. And that's what's interesting is like, do you have the discernment to know? Do you understand like how to harm or reduce while you're seeking this? Because like I said, like I've done plenty of things in my life that I am not proud of, things that I'm like, why did I do that? And a big part of it is like, I didn't have the wisdom or discernment, and I've gained that wisdom and discernment, caveat, to figure it out and to get better, and I'll continue doing that, but they're not doing that work while they're adventuring. They're just adventuring, and now they're 45 and 50, and they're like, why aren't people interested in me? Why am I single at 40? Why are there no women who want to be with me? And by the way, it's not like women from a progressive perspective are even as a whole, even that dateable. That's why queer women are still struggling to date. Because if you're queer and deconstructed, it's not like you have more women to date. Most women are still upholding patriarchy. Most women are still deconstructing. Most women at most are hanging out with girls, still centering men. So it's not like you have more options. If you're lucky, you can find somebody. And that's why you have to accept and make sure that your life and your sense of meaning is first and foremost about your relationship with self. And then your relationship with others, and then maybe your relationship in a partnership, right? And so, yeah, I do think there's like something like that happening where adventure is good, but there's no wisdom to discern the good kinds of adventure. And then even the kinds of adventure that could be good for you, you don't have a healthy relationship with it. Like, you can take it back to when Sneeko was trying to do his open relationship thing and he was trying to like do his threesomes. Could have been a great adventure, but instead it turned into something toxic because he wasn't doing it for the right reasons. You can have healthy threesomes or you can have unhealthy threesomes. But it's not the threesome, but there's so many people that are like porn is bad, masturbating is bad, threesomes, nudist parades, gay parades, all bad. But yet it's so weird that for these guys who want their open relationships and a lot of women to fuck, will also say that pride parades are too sexual. It's like, girl, again, it's about deconstructing. And yes, one pride parade is not like another. So it always started off as a protest. And remember, it will always be a protest. Remember that pride is not simply a parade. It is a protest.
That he is not engaging with the actual arguments. In fact, he came prepared not to engage with them. He is engaging with a fantasy version of them that is easier to defeat. Kyla sees the misrepresentation. She opens her mouth to correct him. And then...
adventure and risk should all be discarded. Now, I would categorize all of those things as the very best of being a real man. Why would you want them discarded?
I don't want most of those things. Let's talk about stoicism.
The buzzer sounds. The crowd has voted.
Damn.
Kyla is out, which sucks. She was winning on substance. She was crushing him. She navigated his Gish gallop. She exposed the contradictions. She kept returning to the unanswerable question. She showed empathy. She made smart concessions, and she was voted out. But that's...
I do think she looks really fabulous with this black hair.
the format of Surrounded. Everyone wants their turn, understandably so. And Kyla's time ran out just as she was about to land yet another blow. It's not enough though. She has done such a good job that Piers still needs to control the frame. He needs to deliver one final insult.
I don't want most of those things. Let's talk about stoicism.
I think we agree with each other. I think you agree with me too much. Anyway, it's lovely to meet you. Thank you.
It may not look like it on the surface, but I assure you, this is a patronizing pat on the head. Nice try, but I win.
I think you agree with me too much.
They do not agree. Kyla believes that masculinity is socially constructed,
We understand that masculinity has somewhat morphed and shifted.
while Piers believes that it's eternal.
I think masculinity has never changed.
She believes that Victorian Stoicism is harmful,
You have to look at things like Victorian Stoicism and recognize how that has harmed young men.
while he thinks that it's ridiculous to criticize it.
Stoicism? Don't be ridiculous.
Hold on.
She believes that history
ridiculous.
shows variation,
The samurai era of masculinity looks very different than maybe the knights of the round table and whatnot.
while he believes that history shows a single global thing.
Actual masculinity, when it was first devised as a
think that-
word, it's not an American thing, it's a global thing.
He is saying, see, you couldn't disprove me. You basically came over to my side. But this is rewriting the history of the conversation that we just watched. It's frame control. Piers never answered the Sparta question once. He dodged it at the beginning, he dodged it in the middle, and he drowned it out at the end. And that is the lesson of frame control. You don't have to be right. You don't have to make sense. You don't even have to be coherent.
Exactly. What do I always say? All of civilization got this far in our development with very little facts, with very little knowledge. And that's what's amazing about being, that's what maybe, I think that's what's the irony of it is so many of us doubt ourselves as being good enough, a good enough person to be a YouTuber, a good enough person to be a teacher, a good enough person. And then there's some guy over there who's like, I could do that. And then he just does it. And now he's famous and rich. And you're like, you don't have to know much. You just have to be the right kind of something. And all of a sudden, boom. And that's kind of the point of it, which is so interesting.
Just need to ensure that the question that would destroy you is never, ever answered.
Do you think that Athenian masculinity and Spartan masculinity were the same in the Greeks?
And that unanswered question is still hanging in the air, haunting the studio. So shall we? Did Spartan and Athenian masculinity look the same? Did samurai and Victorian masculinity look the same? No. No, they didn't. And because they didn't, Piers Morgan is wrong. And deep down, in the quiet moments when the applause dies down, I think he knows it.
I think
That's
the
the
left
problem.
men. I mean,
Just to pause you.
They do. Even movies like Barbie. I'm slightly aware.
Anyhow, as always, thank you kindly for the view.
Okay, so if you go to the comments section of this video, Kyla says, that was me. Glad you enjoyed it and saw the error he made. Was sad to get voted off before he clarified what form of stoicism he meant. He would have dodged. Okay, so now she's building network. Now she's saying, hey, I'm here. I saw your video. Now I'm a person. Kyla is professionally, trajectory-wise, doing very well. Ethically, morally, questionable and honestly very unwell, I think, given she's still associating with all of these Sneakos and Destinies and all of the Stitch, all of the, you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of one of those things where, like, you know, from a career perspective, it's like, cool, dude, good for you and all that. But also, you know, this was Rationality Rules, caveat. I haven't watched all of his stuff, but I've been watching him for like years off and on. Apparently he might have some questionable opinions about trans people. We'll try to look for updates on our own, but I'll also link his channel in case you want to check him out for whatever reason. Yeah, interesting. I will say, I don't envy anyone's position in this bubble. I think it's really good to review, and I think it's really important for us to have the conversation through this lens. But I think it's really important we also don't collab on these channels personally. I'm not completely, you know, writing off somebody who does, but I do think I look at people with a raised eyebrow who decide to engage in Jubilee in this format. You know, the Jubilee videos that are like 6 gay guys and 1 straight guy? I don't care. Those are cute. But this particular Jubilee format, I think is really, really bad. I just think it's not harm reduction. I think it's really, really bad. I don't think it's good. I think it's important we talk about it though. Like we talk about it, you know, but I think it's important that we also don't. And there's a difference. Like I know, because some of the theories in progressive circles are, should we even talk about these people? The truth is, it doesn't matter. They're going to get famous and rich without you. They don't need you to talk about them to get rich and famous. Because the fact is like they're already doing it. Their fans are already making them go viral. Guys, remember the difference between progressives and conservatives and liberals is, and this is not like a call to action, but I will tell you, the difference is that Andrew Tate, Aiden Ross, all these people, they beg and encourage their audience to make clips of them. And then their audience does most of the legwork for them. Their audience is the one clipping things and sending it to people. Most progressive audiences are never thinking about doing that. So every time somebody's like, why aren't they more popular? We don't evoke our audience. We don't usually say, guys, please go make clips, go send them to your friends. But they will. And then they do. And that's the point. So us talking about them is never going to be the reason they're popular, but us platforming them will be the reason they get validation. So don't platform them. It is a form of validation. I see that now as somebody who used to formally platform some of these people. I won't do that anymore, but I will still talk about them because somebody's got to. You know, we can't just ignore it like our parents did. And then these parents aren't intervening in their kids' lives. And they think, well, I don't have to talk to my sons about Andrew Tate because like, that's not, you know, that's silly, but you have to talk to your kids about Andrew Tate. You know, you have to.